What is a cruiser? It is big, it is heavy, and above all it gives you that mechanical shifting feel. Well, when it comes to that last point, Benda says no, that does not have to be the case, and fits a CVT gearbox to the new Chinchilla 350 Neo. So that makes me wonder, has Benda become the first manufacturer to really understand how to build a cruiser? The cruiser class has been pretty stuck for the last few decades. There was one established line and people were happy enough with that. But over the last few years, Benda has shown that you can be brave, that you can try something new as well. We have seen it with models like the Napoleon Bob 250, the Napoleon Bob 500 and the LFC 700. We have tested all of them and we came away impressed by every single one. Simply because there was finally something different on offer and because Benda is genuinely willing to take a risk. And now the story continues with the Chinchilla 350 Neo. Here the thinking was simple. This is a cruiser and we want it to feel relaxing. So they have removed one component that usually takes away some of that relaxation, and that is the gear shifting. What we have here is in fact a cruiser with a variomatic transmission, and now we are going to take a closer look at how that works. The most exciting thing about this new Benda happens right here. And I am not even talking about the V-twin engine with 343 cubic centimeters, 34 horsepower and 31 Newton meters of torque. I am talking about this, the CVT gearbox. A CVT gearbox, also called a variomatic transmission, does not have fixed gears like a classic manual or a conventional automatic gearbox. The idea behind it is actually quite simple. You have two pairs of conical pulleys that can change their effective diameter, and between them runs a belt. If the diameter at the front is small and the one at the rear is large, you get a low ratio, and that is what you need for pulling away. But when the front diameter gets larger and the rear one gets smaller, you get a tall ratio. That is exactly what you need for relaxed cruising, especially at higher speeds. In truth, all of us know this concept already, because it is used on scooters every single day, but in a cruiser this is something completely new. Just that alone already changes the whole character of the bike quite noticeably, and the whole thing does have real advantages, because now we no longer have to change gear, we no longer have to use a clutch, we simply climb on, start the engine and ride away. It makes daily riding easier because all you really have to focus on is the throttle. The downside though is that it can become quite monotonous very quickly, because the engine is always running in its ideal rev range, and that means you get almost no variation at all in the riding experience. That is convenient, but it also changes the emotional rhythm of riding in a very obvious way. Right then, let us see what it is actually like to ride this Benda Chinchilla 350 Neo. In truth, it is about as simple as riding can get. We start it, roll on the throttle, the bike goes into drive, and off we go. And as you can hear, there are no shift events at all. I just twist the throttle, and you can see it in the revs as well. The engine simply stays in exactly the right operating range all the time, so you always have the optimum drive available. I also want to let you hear a little of what it sounds like from the saddle, because of course one emotional element is missing here, and that is the feeling of a gear change. In terms of sound, it really does remind you of a scooter, because the revs are being held rather than rising and falling in the way you would expect. But what is nice compared with the scooter naturally is that here we have a real V-twin. It is liquid cooled, which means it feels properly modern as well, not rough around the edges, not crude, and that makes it genuinely very easy to just cruise along on the Benda in a totally relaxed way. I could operate the whole bike with one hand in theory, and that is exactly what is so pleasant about this Benda Chinchilla. It simply makes motorcycling easier for me. So yes, it is easy, approachable and immediately familiar, even if you have never ridden a manual motorcycle before. Of course, a lot of people will say, hang on, I ride a motorbike because I want to do something, I want to feel something, I want to use the clutch and change gear. And yes, maybe that is exactly what you want. But maybe the beginner, the person sitting on a motorbike for the very first time, does not see it that way. Maybe that rider is thinking, where do I look, how do I brake, where is the throttle and all the rest of it. Those riders want a calm ride riding experience, and above all, they want a simple riding experience. And that is exactly what the Benda Chinchilla 350 Neo gives me. You notice that especially in daily use, when you simply want to get from A to B without effort. When we accelerate out again here, the engine just stays in its sweet spot. We get a really strong intake sound coming from the area around the tank. And I actually think that is cool. I am not really a fan of an excessively loud exhaust. I would much rather have a nice intake sound, and that is definitely present on the Chinchilla. Although I do have to say that at times, especially when you are riding uphill for a long stretch, it can become a bit too droning for me. What we also do not get with the CVT transmission is engine braking that you can control yourself. In other words, when I am going downhill, I cannot just shift down to avoid using the brakes so much. On this bike, it is like a scooter, which means I really do have to use the brakes much more. I cannot rely on the engine to do much of the decelerating for me. But fine, that is simply part of the concept, and it is something you can get used to. That does take a bit of adjustment, especially if you are coming from a traditional manual cruiser. And in any case, I do not really think this Benda Chinchilla is going to spend a lot of time charging through mountain passes. As for the rest of the components that matter on a good cruiser, the seat is appropriately comfortable. The suspension is certainly not on the very highest level, but it is still sufficiently comfortable that I can happily ride it in town. And speaking of town, this CVT gearbox does not only need to work out here, it also needs to work in an urban environment. In fact, that is exactly where it comes into its own, because city riding is where you would otherwise be doing the most clutching and shifting, especially in stop-start traffic, and that is where a CVT transmission really works in my favor. Even though, luckily for me, there is not much traffic right now, imagine this beautiful seafront promenade when it is properly busy and everything starts bunching up. That is precisely the moment when I do not want to be changing gear. I do not want to be constantly doing something just to stay in the flow. No, I can slow right down here, almost come to a standstill, then perhaps ask for a little forward drive again, and I can do all of that without a clutch. I can move at walking pace without physically straining myself in any way, and that is what is so lovely about a CVT transmission. That is why it actually fits the cruiser concept rather well. And that matters, because comfort and ease of use are supposed to be central parts of the whole idea here. Slow speed maneuvers are no problem here either, simply because all the hard work of clutch control has been taken away. So yes, on a nice country road, but above all in an urban setting, this system makes real sense, and more importantly, it actually works very well. That gives the whole bike a very friendly, very accessible feel right from the first few meters. There is one extra downside to the variomatic system that you would not really have seen while riding, but that I can show you now during this static look at the bike. I have to keep holding the brake all the time because I cannot secure the bike when it is in gear. It will simply roll away. Sadly, there is no parking brake on this Benda, and that is definitely something they could look at for the next model. But let us have a look at the riding position. The seat height is pleasantly low at 690 millimeters. Exactly how you would want it on an A2 cruiser. Because naturally this is the sort of bike on which you will see a lot of beginners and returning riders. The riding position itself is classic cruiser. My legs are stretched forward, but not so far that I feel as though I am completely sprawled out. That means even smaller riders should still find a solid footing. In front of me the handlebar is pleasantly wide, it has a nice bend to it, and it comes towards me slightly, so on the Benda you are not pitched too far forward. Instead you sit nicely upright and very comfortably. The seat is well padded too, so comfort is absolutely fine. And in day-to-day use that can make a bigger difference than many people might initially expect. And if you wanted to feel even more relaxed, I actually discovered that the CVT layout gives you a real advantage. The rear brake lever is not down here by your foot, it is up on the handlebar. And because there is no gear lever on the left either, when I am riding in a straight line I can really stretch out, rest my feet further forward and get into an even more laid-back seating position. I would only recommend that when you are going straight though, because as soon as you get into a corner, your feet will be the first thing to touch the ground, and if they get knocked away, that is definitely no fun. There is one thing Chinese manufacturers are genuinely very good at, and that is equipment. And on the Chinchilla, Benda certainly has not been stingy. The ignition key is mounted in the classic place on the side, exactly where it belongs on a cruiser. When I switch on the display, I have a nice TFT screen in front of me showing the key information. On this particular bike, the rev counter is actually the least important instrument. It is there because the software clearly allows it, but you do not really need it because we are not shifting here anyway. Naturally, I always have my phone mounted next to it, partly for navigation with Kalimoto, and frankly that is all I need my phone for when I am out riding. An SP Connect mount is of course a very good solution for that. Otherwise, the handlebar carries the classic switchgear that you need on a bike like this. It is not overloaded, we do not have to click through unnecessary riding modes or anything like that. We do not need any of it, we are on a cruiser. What we can do, however, is switch off the traction control if we fancy doing a nice CVT burnout. I have not tried that yet, maybe I should have done, just to see what happens. But apart from that, the equipment level is good. More importantly, it includes everything you really need, and for this price class and this category of bike, that deserves genuine praise. We have adjustable levers on the right and on the left, which means I can set both the front brake lever and the rear brake lever exactly how I like them. And in this class of machine, where the target group includes beginners and riders returning to bikes, that is particularly important. So now let us come to a final conclusion. This time Benda has put a cruiser on its wheels that is visually rather restrained. At the front we do get a very nicely designed headlight, one that reminded Carlos behind the camera of a ring light. He immediately started putting on makeup for today's shoot. But apart from that, the design of the Chinchilla is rather understated. Perhaps the highlights are here in the tank, where the Benda logo is hidden behind a plastic cover, and then of course this beautiful long exhaust. Other than that, the visual language is pretty clear and very much classic cruiser. So the overall package is not trying to be radical everywhere. It is trying to be clear, usable and approachable. What is really exciting is what sits right here between my legs, and that is the CVT gearbox. Using this system in a cruiser is something genuinely new, and above all it fits perfectly with Benda's brand line, because once again they are trying something different, being a bit bolder and offering people a concept that simply does not yet exist in this form on the market. We already saw that with the LFC 700. We saw it in a certain way with the Napoleon Bob models as well. And that means this Chinchilla with the CVT transmission is exactly the kind of motorcycle Benda wants to bring to market. New ideas, innovative ideas that also work in practice. And yes, it definitely does work on the new Chinchilla 350 CVT. And in a market segment that has often felt repetitive, that alone already makes this bike stand out. Yes, the engine sound is a bit too droning for me, and I also think that some of the emotion this V-twin engine ought to have gets lost through the CVT gearbox. But for riders shopping in this part of the market, for an A2 cruiser at around 7,000 euros, the Benda Chinchilla offers something genuinely interesting. Because you get that CVT transmission, you do not have to change gear, and that makes daily riding easier, and above all makes the step into the world of motorcycling easier as well. And speaking of that, I have already mentioned the price. It comes in at under 7,000 euros. In Germany we are looking at 6,500 euros. 3 colors are available. And in Austria the price is 6,800 euros. So yes, Benda really has impressed me with the Chinchilla 350 Neo this time. It joins the lineup of genuinely cool Benda motorcycles. This time not because of wild styling, but because of the technology they have built into it. Naturally, I am curious to see what this manufacturer brings in future. At the EICMA we saw some exciting concepts, and I think the brand is taking exactly the right path if it wants to establish itself in Europe, and the curiosity is clearly there among people out in the real world as well. Test rides on Bendas always go down well, simply because they feel fresh and because they spark that curiosity. And of course I am curious to know whether your curiosity has now been sparked by the new Chinchilla 350 Neo. Write it in the comments, I would love to know. And above all, I would love to know what you think of the idea of a CVT gearbox in a cruiser. Because if you want to be mean about it, you could say this is basically a scooter dressed up as a cruiser. But it works and it is cool. Let me know your opinion in the comments, and we will see each other in the next video. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye for now.